Welcome to Atlas Carbon's webinar. This is an important one for this current time, dispelling misconceptions in the Australian soil carbon markets. I think as people in the rural industry, we've all seen the media increasing in this area and some knowledge not being as easy to find as some would like. So we hope to answer a few of your questions today. My name's Rafe Ritchie. I am a pasture consultant with Atlas Carbon, and I'd also like to welcome two of our senior staff, Ashley Silver, our CEO, and Sean Hoobin, our Director of Carbon Services. So welcome, team. Just as an introduction today, I thought it's interesting to note that soil carbon's an emerging field feeding into an emerging market. So there's a lot of misconceptions and a lack of knowledge and a lack of availability of knowledge for our farmers and producers at the moment. So Atlas is working very hard to fix this gap. We have some questions that have come from producers and from customers that we're going to answer today, and hopefully they'll tick off a few of the big issues that people would like answered. I would say that this is a big topic, and there's a good chance, fairly good chance, that we won't be able to answer all your questions today. But if that is the case, we'll look to run another webinar and really get to the bottom of that. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We can see the lists are starting to pile up now of all the people getting involved, which is wonderful. Please, if you have any questions, pop them in the questions and answer section. And as I said, if we can get through, we will try and get through to all of them. I think time is of the essence here, and we really are. It's really important for us to get rolling. So if we can, I think we'll move into some of the questions that we've got from the field. So I'll kick off with this one, and Ashley and Sean, please dive in where you see fit, and also I should say where area you prefer. I think the first one's really important. What is additionality, and what am I expected to introduce in my carbon project?
All right, Rafe, I'll take that one. Additionality does get kicked around a lot. It's fundamental to carbon projects. And the basic concept is there has to be a new action, so you are storing additional carbon. So it's got to be something beyond business as usual, beyond what you've done in the last 5 years. For a soil carbon project, there is a list of eligible activities you can undertake, which can count as new if they are something beyond what you've done before. So on any property, on any grazing property, you may have been doing a number of these eligible activities already. So the key part is to identify a new one that you will commence. And timing is pretty critical to this, and the regulators are pretty strict on this one. So the new activity has to commence post-registration of the project to make the project eligible. So, if you're looking at your farm, and obviously, there's changes that happen all the time, but if you're thinking of making a significant management change on your farm, and you're also thinking of doing a soil carbon project, it's probably good to take the time and think it through and talk to people about when you start that project, and if you want to hold off until you've registered a carbon project.
Yeah, thanks. That's a fantastic place to start, I think, Sean. It's so important that people know the base of what they do and the base of their project too. It's not just a kickoff. Is there any second question here? Is there any difference between baselining and soil testing? And can I baseline without committing to a carbon project?
Sure, I'll take that one. So doing a baseline requires that you have an approved project map from the regulator that dictates how your soil strata and carbon estimation areas are assembled, as well as how sample points are elected or set throughout that map. Baselining also requires certain approaches to maintain the chain of custody of your soil before it goes to the lab. And so you can't just take historical soil samples or any kind of soil tests you've done and use those as your baseline. The second part of that question you asked was if a baseline can be done without committing to a carbon project. You do need to have your carbon project registered or at least pre-approved before you go and do your baselining, because a baseline is only legitimate once that map has been approved. So sampling can be used to inform that project map, which helps with your baselining and getting prepared for it. This is something we do in our blueprint program to help you get kickstarted, but you can't use any historical soil tests for your baseline.
Thanks, actually. I think that's a really important thing I hear a lot of. One question I go back on that is, or to ask again on that quick, is if you do a baseline to your baseline test in your farm, and it's not tied to the structured carbon credit system, does that mean that it effectively doesn't exist in the carbon universe, to make it a rough term?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Are there any different types of carbon credits, and how do they affect my bottom line differently?
Okay, there are a lot of carbon methods out there. So in Australia, there's obviously soil, there's a variety of vegetation methods, there's blue carbon, there's herd management, and then you've got a whole lot of global methods as well. So yeah, there's a lot of carbon credits and a lot of different methods out there. So yeah, it is a kind of complex field. How do you decide which way to go? I suppose the fundamentals are you need to actually understand what the cost is to implement a project and what the income is going to be. So you might look at it, and the cost of some carbon credit projects might be quite low, but then the outcome might be that the credits don't have as much integrity in the market and therefore get a lower value. So you've got to trade off the cost of doing it and what your income will be. And obviously, it's also critical to understand what the impact's going to be on your core grazing productivity. With soil carbon, it's a win-win situation. So good grazing practice, other activities, build soil carbon, and build your productivity. With some vegetation projects, there may be shorter, longer-term impacts on your ability to graze, but not always. So you've got to take into account the whole impact on your business, basically. So yeah, it's like any major business decision. You do your research and you work out what you want to do. To assist that sort of process, Atlas Carbon does offer a free cost-benefit report to help you understand the fundamentals, and that looks at the costs over 25 years, as well as looks at the potential benefits from carbon credits and from grazing productivity. So yeah, it's a good place to start just to get the basic numbers.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. So just, I think one thing I'd ask is your soil carbon, your sequestered soil carbon credits, they're of the highest quality, aren't they, when they get through the ACCU system?
Soil carbon does, get a good look in the market. I suppose, Australian methods are fairly respected, and also with soil, you're actually measuring. There's been a bit of a pushback on some of the credits that are from models rather than measuring. So with soil carbon, you're actually measuring it. So, you go baseline to your first offset report, and you can see the difference. So for that reason, they're seen as high integrity.
Yeah, thank you. Next one, can I combine a series of small farms together to do a soil carbon project, since they are too small to qualify for a project individually?
The response to this question is it depends. So some properties can be aggregated into a single project registration, but some of the reasons that would enable that would be they are close by, they are of similar land type, and you need to ensure in that case, if there are different ownership structures across those properties, that you do have alignment on the terms of a carbon project. One of the key elements here will be the proponency of that project. For instance, if you and your neighbors are trying to come together to get a project registered. If land is very far away, so if the parcels are really in different locations across the state, for instance, it actually just might not make sense. When you look at the costs of doing a carbon project, quite a bit is variable cost based on the size of the property. And the fixed costs, you look at things such as just the time to do the paperwork and assemble some of the registration, building out the mapping, and things such as audit costs. And if you're working with land that is very, very different and very far away, you actually won't be able to save much on some of those fixed costs by aggregating. So certainly a case-by-case basis, but if the properties are close by and similar, that's where you're going to have a higher potential to benefit from that approach.
Yeah, thanks, Ashley. That's really good. Next one, guys. This is probably a pretty good one for everyone out there. Am I limited in my options to run a soil carbon project if I have a fair amount of timbered country?
Yeah, thanks, Rafe. Yeah, we had a fair few discussions with graziers about their properties and vegetation and how it impacts a project. So under the method, soil carbon projects can occur on areas of your property that have tree cover. And in fact, sometimes it can actually help carbon storage, depending on the circumstances. The key issue is whether the veg allows for the eligible activity to occur. So basically, if you've got open woodlands and you can graze there, grazing is going to be fine for an activity. But if the forest cover is too dense and it's not really viable for grazing, obviously you're not going to be using that as an eligible activity. To give one example, another aspect to this is the method has some requirements around clearing of forest cover, which is 20% canopy cover and 2 meters in height. So for any areas of your property that have been cleared that meet those thresholds in the past 7 years, that part of your property can't be included in your soil carbon project. And also, once you've signed up, you also can't clear that same forest cover area during the project. The basic idea being that you'll be reducing soil carbon storage by doing so. So in the mapping process and your planning process, you just need to be aware of what the method says about the forest cover areas and how they have to be addressed or excluded from the project. Interestingly enough, there's a new method that's been developed. The integrated farm method is the short title. It's been kicking around in draft for a while, but it holds a lot of potential. Basically, rather than just choosing one method or the other for vegetation or soil, the idea is that you can look over your entire property and you can manage it so you store carbon in both soil and vegetation, which allows you to have similar costs to do a project, but you can get multiple carbon credit revenue streams. So when that finally comes out, it'll be good taking a look at it to see how you can maximize the opportunities from your property while still making sure the grazing remains viable.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. I think it's really important to note there, isn't it, that there is a real separation at the moment between a vegetation carbon project and a soil carbon project, isn't there?
Yeah, and the way it's done right now, it's really hard to try and do 2 projects on a property. You certainly can't do it in the same area. So the new integrated farm method has promised a lot. Obviously, devil's in the detail, but when it does come out, it could be it could make a lot of properties that couldn't do a viable project, veg or soil, might be able to have a viable project when the revenue streams are combined. So yeah, definitely worth keeping an eye on that one.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. That's interesting stuff. Next one, guys. Is there a limit to the amount of soil carbon that I can sequester?
Sure, I'll take this one. The short answer is likely yes. So all of the available data points, data models that we look at, such as ROFC and Socrates, demonstrate that there are likely saturation points that any given soil will reach with regard to the soil carbon levels. Now, it depends very much so on the individual property. So soil carbon potential is driven by a lot of aspects of what's going on a specific property. So the soil chemistry, biology, historical management practices, rainfall levels, temperature, slope, There's a lot of variation, and there's a lot of different models that can go into trying to get a slightly more accurate estimation for what a certain property can achieve with regard to sequestration. But I think the general consensus is that soil will hit a saturation point. Each property will have a different saturation point. And what you can sequester up until that point really depends on where you're starting. And so if you have been doing really good management for a long time, you may have already sequestered a fair amount of your soil carbon, and the potential to deliver more on that may be a bit limited compared to someone who, for instance, is transitioning from a cropping enterprise into livestock, and who's switching from, more aggressive management styles to more resilient practices. So again, it depends. Every property is different. We do recommend anyone considering a soil carbon project work to get a more personalized estimate of what the potential is on their property, because there are some properties that just won't perform well because of the inherent makeup of where they're at. So you don't want to be investing in something that might not give you a return. So something to watch out for sure.
Yeah, thanks, Ashley. The next one is probably pretty relevant for some people in New England. It's I want to maintain carbon neutrality and sell carbon neutral beef or wool, so I don't need to hold on to my carbon and so don't I need to hold on to my carbon and not sell it?
Yeah, we probably could do a whole half hour or hour session on this one. It's a biggie. So yeah, it's important to understand, what your goals are and what your reasons are for trying to attain a certain standard. And even the terms themselves, there's carbon neutrality, there's net zero, there's climate positive, and there's all these kind of subtle differences between those different definitions. So looking at the reason, I suppose you've got to decide if it's about market access or price premium or other reasons. And I suppose associated with that is like, who's setting that standard? What standard are you trying to comply with? So yeah, all that sort of prelim needs to be sorted through. But then you can look at your options. So depending on the scheme, there's the opportunity to sell the ACCUs that you develop on your property through a soil carbon project, and then buy cheaper global credits to achieve net zero. Obviously, some schemes don't really want to do it that way, but it is a viable option to look at if you want to sort of sell as well as achieve climate neutrality or net zero. Yeah, holding your ACCUs can be a sensible thing to do. It's up to every individual to make a decision about what they want to do, whether it's ACCUs or other carbon credits. Price will change, as well will the requirements for carbon neutrality. So just because you earn carbon credits doesn't mean you have to offload them. You can hold them. And also, it's not some sort of dichotomy of like I have to sell them or I have to hold them. You can sell some, hold some, and I suppose it all depends on looking at what it will take to get your property to carbon neutrality or net zero. So there's a bit of calculation that needs to occur there. And I suppose the other big one is reducing emissions is going to be a big part of this. So for a 25-year veg or soil carbon project, that will give you credits for that period, but those credits will flow over at different times, and then after the 25 years they won't be there anymore. You'll either have to have a new project or do other things. So I think there's going to be a big focus on reducing emissions as well as storing emissions on farm. Yeah, and I suppose one thing before you even get to that decision about whether you sell them or hold them, you need to start a carbon project. So I suppose starting a carbon project, allows you to make that decision. So it's kind of a no regrets thing to do if it all stacks up well. But a soil carbon project will allow you to either put them to your market claims or to sell them. So it's worth looking into if you're concerned about what market access might be in the future.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. I think actually one of our on the chat there, Emma Robinson's just written a question: why are farmers selling their soil carbon, won't they need it to sell their farm outputs in the future?
Yeah, and I know looking at the future is a really tough one. So is the government going to require anything? They've only just put requirements on the major polluters in Australia, so that one might take a while. Maybe it's more likely that some of the sort of major global markets might require standards for carbon neutrality or other things. So it is really hard to actually determine what's going to happen in the future, but that's the way it's trending. Whether it's consumer driven or other reasons, there's going to be greater scrutiny of the climate and environmental impact of products. So yeah, I think you need to look into that and do your math. Reducing emissions, storing carbon, and what will it take to actually achieve any particular standard that's out there.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. I think it's interesting you say there. Once if you're not in a system and not baselined in a system, then it doesn't. You can't really make any claims either side, can you? Selling your products or whatever, you still need to be within a project, don't you?
Yeah, well, to actually hold credits and use them, you do. There are other ways to look at your carbon footprint, but I suppose doing it through an approved method actually gives you a lot more integrity and a basis for your claims. And jumping back to the integrated farm method, the kind of a side benefit of that will be it'll look over your entire property, not only at your emissions, but also at what you're storing through veg and soil carbon and potentially other methods as well. So the integrated farm method holds the potential for bringing more ACCU streams, but also to provide a high integrity means to look at your entire operations and what your carbon/climate footprint is. So again, when that comes out, it'll be worth looking at.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, man. Next one is probably pretty good as it's starting to dry off. What happens to my farm if we go into drought or experience extreme weather events that impact the soil carbon that we've sequestered?
Yeah. So on this one, so I think the question was really around what happens to my carbon project if we go into a drought and this impacts the soil carbon and the project performance. So for better or for worse, carbon projects are at least a 25-year commitment. And really what you're aiming for in the long run is that the amount of soil carbon in the ground is higher at the end of that 25-year period than it was at the start. And so the method does account for the fact that there will be variability year on year based on weather. And it's really the impact of those additional activities, improved management, that's able to make the net performance of soil carbon increasing, even though there is weather variability year on year. Now, if you're coming up to one of your offset reporting periods, which currently the regulation is that has to happen at least every 5 years. If you're coming up to that year 5, and that's the year of a severe weather event such as drought, there is permission within the regulation to submit for a postponement of that offset reporting. You start with 1 year and then you can go up to 2 years. This means that the regulator recognizes, hey, during this incident, we're going to give this property time to come back and recover from that extreme event and delay that reporting period for them. What we've seen is on well-managed properties, carbon levels do rebound within a season after an experience such as drought, as long as you are maintaining a level of ground cover and doing those practices that we know deliver on soil carbon in the long run. Now, if there's what you would call a force majeure event in which the property is absolutely destroyed, there's no going back, you're leaving the farm, this type of event would be covered under the buffer pool protection in the method. So if those on the line have gone through a cost benefit report with us where we talk about the breakdown of the different government discounts, there is that 5% buffer pool that's taken off of every single project before ACCU issuance, and that acts in a way an insurance scheme for projects that if something just absolutely decimates that land area, the government turns to that buffer pool and not to the property owner.
Yeah, I think so. It's probably going to be a big question coming forward the next few months as the conditions dry off a bit, and yeah, we all start to get away from these big rainfall events. Sean, I think the next one's pretty technical, so it's on your side, and it is, can I sell my farm if I'm in a carbon project, and what happens to it?
Okay, short answer is yes. And I suppose the two options are whether the carbon project ends or continues. So, there's a 25 or 100-year permanence period, but, a carbon project can be exited early for a variety of reasons. The key thing to be aware of is if ACCUs have been issued, these will need to be returned to the clean energy regulator. So for soil carbon projects, we might sort of do the first offset soil sampling at 5 years. So anytime up to 5 years, you haven't been issued ACCUs, it isn't too complex to end a project. Obviously, contractual arrangements and other things might factor into it. So a change of ownership is one reason for an exit if the new owner doesn't wish to continue the carbon project. But in many cases, they might, just because it really is part of the farm income. So obviously, if you sell your property and they wish to take over the project, that can be facilitated. If they don't want to take over the project, it will require the project being exited early. And if there have been any ACCUs issued, these will have to be returned to the regulator. So if you're selling in that situation, the project's not going to continue. You need to factor that in to the sale process and the sale price. So you can still sell it, and you just have to make sure that all the legal and financial aspects are covered off if the project's not going to continue.
Thanks, Sean. That's probably a pretty good, concise answer to a big question there. And I think, as always, one of the last questions here is the big heavy hitter. Ashley, I think this one goes to you. How does the commission structure work, and what does the project developer do to earn the commission from my carbon project?
Sure. So first and foremost, I think there's a growing plethora of different providers out there, and they all have different terms and conditions, commission structures, commercial models. So certainly check the fine print, talk to a lawyer whenever you're handed a document, just to make sure you understand what the inclusions and exclusions are. Commission models in general, there can be some really good benefits. It ensures that the company you're working with has aligned incentives, that that they believe that your property in particular has potential to build soil carbon in the long run, and they're invested to make sure you're successful in doing so. If you feel like you have all that confidence on your own for your property because you understand the soil science, and you know what to do, then there could be other models such as fee for service that could make sense for you. But in order to set up a successful soil carbon project, there's a lot of different technical capabilities that are required, from regulatory understanding to make sure that nothing's happening on the property that could suddenly disqualify you and make your carbon project null and void, to all of the setup that needs to happen. We spoke earlier about soil stratification, mapping soil strata, building your carbon estimation areas, knowing when certain areas should be taken out of a project because they're not going to give a return, overseeing and understanding the right way to do sampling, staying abreast of the latest innovations and technologies to reduce the cost of soil measurement. All of these things, a lot of the leading carbon project developers will have a lot of different technical capabilities in-house to make sure that a property is getting, the best bang for their buck and really using the latest and applying the greatest technologies that are out there. They should also be staying on top of any regulatory changes that might add more opportunities to a property, such as Sean mentioned, the upcoming integrated farm method. Some look for different grant opportunities that can be passed down to landholders. So again, depending on the provider, all of these things I mentioned could be included or excluded, depending on the specific commercial terms. So just make sure you're checking the fine print and understanding the big cost items in a project and whether or not that's covered by the commission being charged.
Yeah, thanks, actually. That's really important stuff. And it's so important that people understand that a good service doesn't doesn't come for free, and free service isn't often good. So thinking of cost and payment in a bad way can often put you in a bad situation with information, and in such a highly regulated area as this, it's going to be important to have a partner that can help you traverse all those really technical specifications of a carbon project, isn't it?
Yeah, certainly.
Well, look, thank you, team. I think every one of those questions could have been its own half-hour session, but I see the clock has struck and the time has come. Once again, look, thank you for joining us for gathering some information with Atlas Carbon here. As always, please, if you'd like some more information, get in touch with us. atlascarbon.ag is the website, and if you are interested in a soil carbon project, please stay on the line. You'll see a tile come up and it will show you how to get through to our free cost benefit report, analysis, and then we come back to you with a report to discuss the viability of your project and the possibilities that you could have. Once again, this is an exciting area, and we really are at the front of it. So information, professionalism, and quality data and quality service, I think, will be the winner in the long run. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Sean. And
Thanks, Rafe.
We'll talk to everyone again in the very near future.
Very good.
Excellent. Thanks all.